Hello, this is Taylor for CSC 110, and this is my final project. I just wanted to put my my assigned numbers up at the top here, just so I can check everything. But starting with question 1, I'm going to count how many primes are in the range that I was given. So I'm going to start by creating a function that would determine if a number is prime or not. So I have, just to make sure I'm going through, if n is greater than 1, because every number is divisible by 1, so it doesn't really count. And then I have a for loop of going through the range of 2 till the number. If anything in between is divisible without any remainders, then it is not prime, so it will return false, otherwise true. And then I have my function to count the number of primes in my range. I started by initializing a count at 0, and then I have another for loop here. Here's my start number, and then to find my lower right number, I just did some math here, so the column times the rows plus that start number, and then I add +1 so it includes that final number in my range. If that number is prime, it adds to the counter and then returns it. So let's see how many primes are in there. Okay, so I'll have a total of 240 primes in my range. And then the second question here, I want to find the number of twin primes. So again, I start with a counter. I have my range here, and then I added another variable which takes I plus 2, because a twin prime is like 5 and 7, so they're only two numbers apart. So if the I in the range is prime, and this j here, which is I plus 2, if that is also prime, then I can add to the twins by 1. So it's how many pairs of primes I have. Okay, so I have 34 pairs of primes, which would come out to 68 twin primes here. Okay, and then question 3 here, I want to find the number of primes per row. So that would be going from left to right. So I wanted to start by kind of making clear of the range for those rows. So each one is going to be the start number plus the number of columns, and that's how I'll get that. So I'm starting with an empty list here that I'm going to put my primes into. I'm going to loop through my range, which is my start, and then my stop number, plus 1, so I include it. And then if that number is prime, we just simply append it and it will return that list. I then used that function in here. I start with counter that's going to count my rows, starting with row 1, and then a counter that's going to count the total number of primes per row. So I have a for loop here that'll go through, again, my range of my start to my finish. And then it's going to add to the row, so row 1. It'll print it, and then it'll print the length of this list here. So it'll insert the starting number plus the number plus the column, so that's my first initial row. It'll count the length after it runs it through here, the length of this list, which will be how many prime numbers there are in it, and then it will add to my count as well, so that'll count the total number. So let's print that one. Okay, so total number of primes is 240, that's right, because that's what I got for my first question up here. And then here are the row numbers, which goes all the way down to 39, which is the last row that I have, and then has these numbers. So there's like 7 primes in the first row, 5 in the second, 6 in the third, so on and so forth. Okay, and then I also want to count the number of primes per column. This one, again, I want to make a range, but it's going to be different than that one because the row's a little easier. It's going from left to right, so I'm just adding the start plus the column number. But this one, it's basically starting at, for example, 8055, and then it goes down below, and I believe that one's like 8010. So I have to do some like number skipping kind of. But again, I start with my empty list. I have my range, and this time I'm using the rows to find it. So I'm going to append the first initial number plus the column times the number. So that'll get me basically just like my list of the numbers that I'm including in this range. So like the 8055 to the 8010 and then whatever plus 55 that is. And that returns it to the list. And then I use that one down here for this function, which I have C for the column number, and I have my counter that's going to count the total number of primes. My for loop, similar range here. I want to update the column number, and now I'm going to have a separate counter for the column count right here, and then I'm going to have another for loop for that one. So it's going to go through my start number, and then it's going to go through and like skip it. So like I said, the 80 and the 55. So it counts, it'll add to the counter for the totals, and then it'll add to the count for my column count, if it's prime. And then I'm going to update my start number. So the first time it goes through here, it starts with 8055, and then the second time it goes through, it starts at 8056. And I'm going to run that one. Okay, so total number of primes, 240, that's right. And then I have the total number of columns, 55. And then this just shows how many are in each. Like my first column doesn't have any, the second one is 5, third one is 6, so on and so forth. Okay, and then the last question here, it's going to put it all together in a large like grid. So I start by importing the turtle module and setting up my screen here. And I just have this just to start my turtle in the top left, so it'll have like the most amount of space to type everything out. And then I have my my prime function from here. I just moved it over here because I'm going to be using that. And then I have my other functions, my red twin and my blue primes, which are going to... So this is pretty similar to when I did my twin prime count. The difference is I also added a variable for n-2 because I want it to highlight both of the numbers in the pair as red twins and not just the first number. So if either of these conditions are met, so if the number plus 2 and those are both prime, then it's true, or if the number and then the number minus 2 are both prime, then that's also true, otherwise false. And then for just regular primes, without any twin primes, those are going to be blue, so I put that function after this one. So first it'll check if they're red. If it's just a lonely prime, it'll be blue. And then to create my grid, I start by creating just a simple function to make a rectangle shape, so the turtle's going to draw a rectangle. I have my for range here going through twice. Then I want to make sure that no matter what, the square is going to be black. So I start by making sure that that color is going to be black, and then forward by the width, and then turn 90 degrees, and then forward by the height, so that'll just make my square then. And then I use that function to create my grid in here. So this one is going to put a number inside of the rectangle. So first I want to move the turtle forward because it's going to put the number in the middle of the square, or excuse me, in the middle of the rectangle. And then I want to determine what color I want to make that number. So if it is a twin, it'll be red. If it's just a regular prime, it'll be blue. Otherwise, it'll be black. Here I just write it out, and then I move the turtle back to where it was so that it can then draw the rectangle around the number. And then both those functions I used in here. So I started by, here's just the equation I used to find my lower number, or my lower right number. And then I have a while loop. So as long as the start number is less than the ending number, it can just keep doing it. And then inside of that I have a for range, because I'm going to be kind of going by row here. So I have the start number and then the start number plus the column number, so it'll be going from left to right in a row. And then again I have my red twin, so if it's red, if it's a twin prime, it'll be red, regular prime is blue, other is black, so it'll determine the color I'm going to use for that. And then it'll put the square around it, and it will move forward to create that next integer inside of the square. And then I needed to find a way to, after it's finished with the entire row, to bring the turtle back to where it needs to be to start the next row. So I'm moving back. I just picked 25 for the width of my rectangle, but any width times the amount of the number of columns that you have, that's how much it'll go back. And then I needed to position it below it and forward just a little bit so it would again start that rectangle in the right spot, or excuse me, the integer in the right spot for it to then make the rectangle around it. And then every time I go through a row, I need to update the start number. So again, I'm going like 80, 55 all the way to the end, and then that next number below 80, 55 is, I think it's like 80, 10, and then it goes through there. And then this will print out the whole thing, so let's run that. Okay, so here is my start number. You can see it's 8055, and then here's that that column that just didn't have any prime numbers in it at all. I think one of them was 0. I think it's this one. And then you can see my twin primes are always one rectangle away from each other. Here's another one, and then down here my final number, the 10199. Here are my random primes scattered throughout here. They're all blue. And then if you count these across, the total number of the columns in the rows are on there too.